Hey Phyllis, hope you're doing well during the pandemic. Stay home, stay safe, and take care. On that note, let's start with today's session. I'm Gautam Kanagi and I will be your trainer for today. And the topic we're going to look at is story retelling. So, what are stories? Where do they come from? When did they originate? Stories are actually as old as human civilization is. Let us go and ask an ancient man where his stories came from. For example, the person who invented the wheel. We remember that person by the stories we've heard about him. The person who looked at fire and understood its capabilities. Fire changed the human civilization forever. All these stories originated when man started understanding nature. Stories are so much more than what we think they are. They've always been the most important power all along the human civilization. From the time humans looked at nature and its power, he built stories around it, created characters from it. Check out Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens or Darwin's theory of evolution. Stories lead to beliefs, and beliefs change our behavior, and behavior changes our cognitive ability. So, all the mythological entities, gods, and other characters live in our minds through stories. We remember them by the things they did and the morals they taught. All of the history is a story in our minds. We remember the kings and queens through stories. Who wouldn't know of the courage of Rani Lakshmi Bai or Ashoka the Great? They exist in us through stories. In other words, stories immortalizes anyone or anything in our minds. There are so these are some of the fictional creations based on history. We've seen them, read them, enjoyed them, and definitely remember them. So why stories? Stories access the left and right sides of our brains, inducing logic and creativity in one space. Stories are easier to remember and recollect. Stories change the world. Stories can access and alter emotional hormones like dopamine, endorphins, and serotonin. These are actually true. When you listen to a story, sometimes you feel the anxiety rushing through. Sometimes you feel so happy because the character is living happily. And sometimes you are scared, and all these hormones can be induced in you by storytelling. So, storytelling is extremely powerful. Stories are also important because they carry these qualities like morality, integrity, values, ethics, principles, rights. They carry these qualities through the incidents and events of the storyline. These are some places where stories are spread and effectively utilized. For example, an elderly telling the stories of her past to her grandchildren. Selling or marketing through storytelling is a booming concept which has been proven effective through studies. Politics, where stories are tools for changing or manipulating people. Teaching through storytelling is one of the best ways to reach children. Retelling stories. One basic gauge of reading comprehension is a reader's ability to retell the story in their own words. Does the reader grasp the main points of the story? Can the reader share the plot, setting, characters, and conflict? Does the reader understand what happened first, and then the middle, and then the last? How do we do it? This is how. So, the first and the foremost concept of story retelling is understanding the story elements. The setting, when and where does the story take place? The plot, what happened in the beginning of the story? What was the problem in the story? What did the characters do to try and solve the problem? How did the problem get solved? And characters are the entities in the story. What do you know about the characters in the story? What did their actions tell you about them? How did they change or grow during the story? So these are the three different most important story elements. And once you understand these story elements, the setting, where and when the story takes place, and if there are pictures in the story, you can look at them and understand more about the setting. So is the setting if the setting were different, how would the story be different? You can guess if depending on the place where the action takes place. For example, if it's happening in the 80s or the 90s or the 2000s, you can guess how the story could run. So these are the three different things: setting, plot, and characters. The most fundamental thing you need to understand when you read a story and try to understand what the story is and then tell it again. That is what the story retelling is, right? You read the story or hear the story, and then you speak it. You recite the story in your own words, or you write the story in your own words. So the next most important step is story sequence map. Once you understand the setting, plot, and the characters, you will move on by defining what happened first, what happened next, and what happened last. So basically, in any story, what happened first will be the introduction of characters, of the setting, and then it will slowly move into the second part, what happened next, by defining the plot. So what is the story going to be about, and then it gets into the plot. And then what happened last will be all the twists and turns that the story will contain, and the hero destroying the dragon and saving the princess. All these things will happen in towards the last. So what happened first, and then what happened next, and what happened last. So this is called story sequence map. So in your assignment, you're going to do basically the exact same thing. You will have a story from which you will extract the story elements, and once you have extracted the story elements, you will also write down on what happened first, what happened next, and what happened last. You will define the story sequence map, and once you're done with that, then you're good to go. You understood the story better than anything, and then you also are able to retell the story exactly in your own words and your own perception, what you think is important. Even more, for example, the story you've read will have something that they consider important, but when you're reading it, there are some, your perception of it could be different. You will consider some things important, so you can also step up and do that. You are free to do that. That is one of the greatest strengths of story retelling. So all the best. Finish off the assignments and submit them as soon as possible, but within the deadline, of course. And so I'm going to end the session with one of my most favorite quotes. Life is a story. What does yours say? Bye bye. Take care.